19 later today. Stuart Rudner is here of Rudner McDonald. He is an employment lawyer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. We wanted to have you in because when this story happened with Mitchell Casado, the man who had appeared multiple times on CNN because he's a flight simulator instructor, and then eventually got fired because his employer felt that he hadn't dressed appropriately. And, you know, anyone watching it, or most people watching it, well, I didn't blink at all at what he was wearing. So it got us thinking, what's allowed, and is the employer even allowed to dictate at all?
Yeah, all good questions. I have to tell you, I had the same reaction to that story, and I have to tell you as well, I briefly considered coming in this morning in my Bermuda shorts and flip-flops and a tank top. You probably would have blinked if I'd done that.
Yeah, possibly.
Which is why a lot of this comes down to common sense. I mean, I knew that would be inappropriate. And actually, I was watching the preview earlier when I was having my makeup put on, and you put it quite well. You said a lot of this, some things are clearly inappropriate. But then you get to where it's closer to the line and we're not sure. And that's where dress code can really come into play and be important. And to your question, yes, I mean, employers are allowed to set standards of conduct, which includes dress codes. So although common sense gets you pretty far, I mean, I knew I couldn't come in here in my Bermuda shorts. And
right.
People in my firm know they shouldn't show up in jeans and a T-shirt. But especially as we were just saying, the weather's getting warmer. We're going to see people start to dress more casually. And for a man coming into an office, do I need to wear a tie, or can I wear an open neck shirt? Can I wear a short sleeve shirt? For a woman, can I wear a tube top or a sleeveless blouse? That's where you get into the shades of gray, where it's going to be to everyone's benefit to have a clearly written policy.
Right, so the employer should put something on paper and make sure everyone's seen it.
When we work with our employer clients, and we say this, it doesn't just apply to dress, but to anything. If you have specific ideas in mind for how you want your employees to behave or not behave, put it in writing. It's going to be to your benefit because it will be much easier to enforce if there's a clearly written policy. And it's going to be to the employee's benefit because they won't have to try to guess. They will know exactly what the rules are.
All right, how much is too much for the employer? Because I'm thinking of facial hair. I'm also thinking of tattoos.
Yeah, Disney was famous for having a no facial hair policy for years, and I believe that's changed in recent years. And they were able to enforce that. Tattoos are now, you don't blink anymore when you see tattoos. I think you're going to have a real challenge with a tattoo because it's something more permanent. Facial hair is somewhat in between. You know, it's easy to regulate clothing. You take it on, take it off. Once you start regulating things that are more permanent, like a tattoo, it's going to be tougher, and you might get into human rights issues as well. And as an employer, you're going to want to be able to justify why you have that rule in place.
Is there any difference between the public and private sector?
Generally speaking, no. I mean, most public sector workers are unionized, so there'll be a collective agreement in place, and there'll have to be some negotiation between the employer and the union. But otherwise, no. I mean, as an employer, you will generally have the right to set the standards of conduct, and most collective agreements have a management rights clause, which give the management that right.
Now, I know that you don't know the case probably that intimately, but Mitchell Casado is apparently going to sue for wrongful dismissal. I mean, just based on what you've seen, do people normally have a good chance of winning when they're being dismissed because of their wardrobe, from what you know?
Well, here's an important point. So I don't know the facts of that case, and I don't know particularly whether there was a dress code in place. So we don't know whether he breached a policy or whether it was just, as the owner said, he embarrassed us.
Right.
And it was just the owner's judgment in that case. But anytime an employee calls our firm and says, I've been disciplined or dismissed because of breaching a policy, the first question I'll ask is, were you aware of the policy? And in many cases, they say, well, no. So it's very difficult to fire anybody in Canada. And I'll take a step back. There's two types of dismissals in Canada. Dismissals without cause are the vast majority, where there's a downsizing, you decide to go a different direction, it's not working out, what have you. And in that case, the person will get notice or a severance package. Then you have dismissals for cause, which are pretty rare, and I've spent far too much of my time studying that issue. I wrote a book on when you can fire someone, and the size of the book indicates how complicated the law is. The book is called You're Fired, and credit to my daughter Michelle for suggesting the title. But an important point to remember is that if you're going to fire somebody for misconduct, whatever the misconduct is, dress code, harassment, theft, whatever, you don't only look at the misconduct in question. You have to look at the entirety of the circumstances. So how long the employee was there, whether they've been in trouble before, how they respond when you confront them. You know, take the dress code. If they respond by being, abusive and arguing with you, then you may be more inclined to fire them, and a judge may be more inclined to agree. If they're apologetic, if they say reassure you it's never going to happen again, all else being equal, a judge is more likely to say, give him a second chance.
Well-
You have to take the whole context into account.
Thanks so much for coming in and talking to us. Stuart Rudner, employment lawyer with Rudner McDonald. Nice
Thanks
having
very
you
much.
here. It's 10 to 8. We're going to take a short break. We will be right back.
I'm Kimberly Fowler with Global One Traffic. We've got a couple of problems clearing on the 401. Let's start with the eastbound 401 pass. Simply a crash on the shoulder. Just one vehicle left should be